Call the Washington County Board of Education meeting to order. After a brief moment of silence, we'll ask Mr. Masters to lead us in a pledge. If he would.
Please stand. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, where to start? You want to start or you want me to start?
Well, you can start, Mr. Chair.
I'll just say that I think Mr. Boyd sent out some emails for everybody to read. I hope everybody got a chance to read those. And I guess our topic of discussion is where Jonesboro School is and financially where they are and or where the county is and where we need to be. And just meet with you all tonight at a last minute just to be able to get your input and thoughts and feelings, and don't know that we have to take any kind of action on anything, but just to discuss it. And I'd say whatever you have, however you want to handle it. I think that's our sole purpose, is just to discuss it and get the board's, thoughts on everything.
I'd like to hear what y'all talked about it.
Sure.
I think that was what was in the email, but yes.
Sure.
Well, it needs to be.
Certainly. Really, the main, I think, point of discussion was we don't have final numbers on the cost of the total project. It is anticipated to be in from the contractor next week, but it also is anticipated that the amount is going to be 30-35% more than what the original discussion was, the $32,750,000. The number that's been recently provided as an updated estimate, it would be, we're looking at the project can cost as much as $10 million more than what was originally discussed. So that would put it at, as it's been designed and through the whole process, that would put the total amount currently estimated to be $42,777,000. The question really is with that expected increase is, as certainly the board's discussions, but ultimately, any funding falls with our county commission. But what I will say is looking at what had been planned for the project, when the lease payment or the beginning of repayment of the loan is expected to begin in 2024, there was enough, at least there was funds targeted, I guess committed on an annual basis to address a loan for the amount of the total cost of the project as it's expected to be next week. So it would just be, with that, it comes out of the it would come out of, if the decision is made, it would come out of the capital funds as the educational capital funds. And it would just be, dedicated money for many, many years, and it would be less dollars for the board to access for other projects. But it would certainly support moving forward with the project if that's what the final decision is.
I think a couple things, and if you don't mind me,
No,
we'll we both sit and listen. You're sparking things I'm thinking of. I think a couple things to think about is, for one, the finances. For two, what it's going to do to the board for many years, and then the other thing is, on the flip side of that, I totally, this has nothing to do with the commission or anything other than the times we're in, so I don't blame them or the contractor or anybody else for the overruns, but also the chance to build this Jonesboro school. And if we didn't, they've not really asked us to do anything at this point. They've suggested but if we don't, then, you know, what's our next option? So I think that's all stuff, you know, stuff you gotta think about as far as whatever we do or however we help, but I think we all, you know, we know the suggested outcome was to take money out of the school fund, so whatever you guys, anybody?
I don't think we should do anything until we find out a number, period.
Well, we can't do anything.
I know, but, you know.
I think the thought is just, do you even want to participate, I think is the question at hand right now.
Well, I mean, everybody sitting at this table said we was gonna build a new school in Jonesboro. We all voted to build a new school in Jonesboro. We know what's happened into the world. So, yes, I feel like we need to build a new school in Jonesboro. Now, grant you the findings and everything's in the way it is, it's, you know, if it was held up a year and the capital projects money gained another section, you know, or are there enough money in the capital projects fund to start, to pay it, you know? We know there's at least $5.5 million in there. I don't know how much more is in there, because we were supposed to get that to do the HVC for Crockett and Boone. So, you know, if there's enough to go with it to cover the off, I'm in favor of using that to do it.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
I think you'd run the risk of maybe having to spend some of that money on one of those two buildings, though, with their age and things going on, is my only concern.
For, what do you mean?
If we waited another year,
Another roof.
Well, no, I'm
Yeah.
saying if the money's in the capital projects money, we'll go ahead and start.
right, but if we could not delay it a year is what I'm
Well,
saying.
I don't want to delay it either. I don't.
I think we run the risk.
We've
of
delayed
spending
it
some
for
of
2 years already.
Yeah, Mr. Planner.
I guess what first thing comes to my mind is how did we find out this week that we're having this trouble? And I don't understand, we got 3 board members sit here that represent us on the Jonesboro project. And we've always kind of been playing catch up every time information's been shared. These 3 haven't always been the Johnny on the spot as far as being the ones given the information to be shared with us. I wish that would get better. I also don't think we can do anything until we find out the total number, next week. I don't even know how the commission's going to do anything tomorrow without the final number. I do see the sense of urgency. I understand we're in a pandemic, everything's went up, but at the same time, I think we just need to take a breath and see what's going to happen.
Let me say one thing on that, because you mentioned it and keep mentioning it. One thing, correct me if I'm wrong, the one comment was not to exceed $10 million. So the number, and I guess it's okay to say the number that was thrown out to us was what, $6.5 million from us, potentially, and $4.5 from the county. So that was what was discussed in the meeting. Go ahead, I just wanted to.
I don't see how
Take
we're
that.
supposed to pay any of that, to be honest. We staff it, we'll maintain it. Now, if it comes out of the capital projects fund, maybe, we pay some of that, and I think it was kind of the agreement beforehand. But to pay any more, I don't know where we're gonna get it. I mean, we give a 4% raise to our teachers this year and staffs, and we already were over budgeted. 4 million is what we budgeted.
4.3 is the budgeted.
4.3 million.
Deficit, yeah.
It's gonna come to an end. I mean, the penny bank will run out, and I don't know, am I the only one sitting here thinking that this ain't another way to make it zero? I mean, I'll just say it.
I'm not,
Some of you that have been on the board longer than I have might remember that when I came on 5 years ago, at the time, when the Boones Creek School was being built and the money was allocated for that, there was money set aside for Jonesboro. I'm not exactly sure how much. I need to go back and do research. But that's money that I'm wondering.
I'd say that probably is
Is-
irrelevant.
Well, I know, but I
That's
mean,
it.
I know, I get that.
I know what you're saying,
Yeah,
but
I
I bet
mean,
it's, but I'm sure they're using it in that $32 million. I'm
okay,
saying.
all right, that's
So-
good to know.
So I'd say we're way past that, now we need way a lot more.
Right, I get that.
I think that's why I was to understand that with you.
That was, yes.
Yeah.
You know, it's
Okay.
really looking at.
I mean, I wasn't here, but I know what you're
Right.
saying.
The
Uh-huh.
cost of this project and not taking into account that
Okay.
past amount.
Well, I really don't want to stop what's going on with Jonesboro now. I just think, I don't want to go back to the drawing board. Like I said, 5 years ago, we've been discussing Jonesboro getting a school, and we're in 5 years. So I don't know, we do need to come up with something. And I don't know if it's us, or, I agree with Mr. Fleener that, I don't know.
That's real.
So, I've got a question. We've got, I guess, the earmarked money for the educational capital fund. Do we have an amount on that? And I think I heard you say that the amount that was earmarked would cover the additional money. Is that correct?
Yes, sir. I mean, based on.
So, do we have a figure as to the amount of money that was earmarked for that?
Well, in the current 5-year plan, beginning in fiscal year +24, it's $2.625 million. So, you know, the revenues coming from the pennies that are allocated for that fund, it would just, you know, it would just reduce the amount of available funds for preventative maintenance and other capital expenses that the board could request access for the funds for. But the amount is 2.625, but that also includes, there's an agreement with Johnson City to receive a portion, you know, an amount of $500,000. So in that 2.625 includes, to my understanding, $500,000. So that'd be about 2.1 million, which I do believe still would be very, very close to covering, if it was a 30-year loan, for the total cost of the new total cost of the project.
So really, the 10 million is not good, but due to the current circumstances, it's understood. Everything has gone up in the building, the trades and things, so that's understandable. But there is money there to capture that. So the money's already there to do so. So if that being said, then I think moving forward would be what we need to do. It's already allocated for it. And then, you know, if we need to make an arrangement or adjustment later to help out with it, I think that might be appropriate down the road. But at this point, it looks like it's ready to go to me. I mean, from what's laid out there to make that payment, and there may be slightly excess there.
I was just gonna ask, I think in that 2.1 million though, can we sit there for 5 years and not buy any school books, or not school books, but school buses? Because that's where that money comes from. And then $400,000 a year, or $640 for technology. Would that go away for 5 years then if we spent that?
No, sir, just based on this schedule, beginning in 2024, the technology purchases are already
In there.
obligated, or at least through the plan. Also, the school bus purchases based on the purchasing cycle is already in there. And then that leaves a quote surplus in that fund of $2.2 million. After the 2.625 million would be expended.
So, like roofs is our biggest, you know, bang that happens. Are we fairly certain, without looking in the crystal ball, in 5 years, we won't need that $2.1 million?
Car out there shining.
Well,
Thank you.
You know, in my opinion, that's why we're doing the facilities evaluation study, you know, the 10-year study, which will include conditions of the systems like roofing, and others. So, I mean, that would give us a better indication of 5 years down the road, so of those, but there always are surprises, of course, but we want to try to minimize that. So, answer your question, you know, the board would have access, assuming all these numbers play out, which they should. I mean, they're conservatively estimated here. Then that would give the board access to that 2.2 million for those kinds of emergencies or other preventative or capital improvements that will, you know, will be identified by the board.
I want to ask Brad something.
Okay, go ahead.
Maybe help.
Yeah, no, that's good.
So, Brad, if you don't mind, so this year we took, y'all help me, 4.5, what did we take out of our other funds for the teacher raises and the CTE and all that? What, the budget we're always working on there. We took out, because I guess one of my things are, I feel like that's almost going to be a pattern every year if we're going to do those sorts of things. So that tax revenue that's predicted, where we're at now, what we did, you know, I want to make sure we don't hurt that amount of money moving forward, that, you know, if we want to give raises or whatever else we want to do, that we're okay there. Is this going to affect that?
It's different buckets of money. You're talking about the county educational capital fund that has nothing to do with our school fund balance.
Where do I get that money?
So the raises each year, that comes from our personal, or the revenues that come into the school system. It's not even part of the county capital fund.
So this money, if we use this money, it's not going to affect the amount of money we're receiving there.
Correct.
Okay.
The only potential effect down the road is if we had more needs than that county educational fund had in it.
Right.
If the county was not able to supplement that, then, you know, if it was an emergency, it would fall on.
Do you have any kind of projection of what that fund gets? In other words, what?
Mr. Boyd has it with him, actually.
So like it's like this year, is that accurate for?
Yeah, I mean, it's based on a commitment of 17 pennies of the property tax rate.
Okay.
And whatever the value of that penny is, and it's estimated to have a small conservative amount of growth each year, which, you know, it's realizing that growth.
So if we take $2.1 million, and here's the other thing they mentioned in our meeting, we don't have to pay for this for 2 years. Two things they mentioned. One thing was it's financeable. The other thing was it don't have to be paid for a couple of years if we chose to do it. I'm just telling you what they said. I'm not suggesting anything. So if I was going to do it, I wouldn't want to carry any type of debt. Personally, I would want to pay it if I was going to pay it over the next 2 years, or at least get it pretty close. So just throwing that out there. Go ahead,
That's
Mary
what
Beth.
I wanted to know. I know Mr. Boyd and Mr. Hale have crunched numbers, and do you have a recommendation, or?
Well, you know, I just go back to what was already scheduled and planned.
Okay.
And I know this increased cost was not, but
Right.
the amount that was scheduled is really able to cover the additional cost. The board certainly could make decisions to lower or to suggest or cooperate and lower that amount that the loan would be for, the final amount. But as far as what was scheduled, it appears that the annual payment would be covered by what was scheduled in this educational capital funds plan.
I think that brings a good point. I guess maybe where I was going more a while ago. Brad, do you see as projections, I don't want to ask Mitch. I don't want to ask Mitch. I want to ask Brad, do you see and Mitch, you can help, you know. But as far as projections for this bucket, I know what's projected out for 5 years, but are we seeing more money coming in pennies that's going to increase this amount of money to us?
You're talking about county pennies. The projection that Mr. Meredith has is a growth of 0.75%.
0.75%?
Yeah, that's the projected growth that is on the schedule. So,
Is that per year? So every year it's 0.75 more than the last year.
And I'm sure that's based on multi-year trends, which probably exceed 0.75 if I was going to guess.
So there's no chance of this money being greater than what it is, probably.
I would imagine it's unlikely that it'll significantly be more, but now Mitch would probably have more information on that side of things.
I mean, you've got, those numbers were based on where we were probably 18 months ago, maybe 2 years ago in terms of growth, before you guys all got busy building houses and everything. So the more of that that's happening, you know, that curve could go up, that number could go up, but like Mr. Boyd said, I mean, it's a conservative approach, and that's kind of what we want to take on the revenues. We were actually up probably almost 2% in assessment values from last year to this year, instead of 0.75%. So there's your answer.
From the bucket that you're speaking of the county, how much do we have in there last year?
Well, the revenue that went in last year was 5.701, not counting any prior year construction in process that would have, funds that would have carried forward.
So I guess my question is, what was in there last year and what did we use? So what's the balance? Is that balance added again the following year if we don't use it all?
Right, that's the way I understand that works, so.
So what's
like
in there?
So what's in there right now?
Well, the sheet that I have in front of me right now shows that there was about 2.2 surplus that carried forward from FY21. However, a lot of that's earmarked because the Daniel Boone roof, only part of that's been paid.
Well,
But-
no, I need to correct you on that.
Okay.
The numbers coming forward from last year, whatever the email was that I sent you and Mr. Boyd the other day, that, and it was it 2.2 or 2.6?
It was right in that range.
So whatever that number is, and forgive me for not knowing what it is exactly, because
You should.
400,000 there or there, I don't know. When we get to millions, we're talking about real money. Yeah. No, Brad, that did include the encumbrance on the Boone, on the Boone High School roof, because we do issue the purchase order on that, and that encumbers all the funds. And so that fund balance is really what's rolling forward for new obligations in the next year.
So is it fair to say then a roughly 2.3 million carried forward, and we have another 5.6 going in this year, so is it fair to say we have roughly $8 million in that category?
That's what I was getting at.
But how much of that's earmarked is what's on this list? So even though it's 8, we're still already pre-spent.
So the technology and the buses, and we've discussed and made other requests that have not been approved at this point. So that's really all that's been obligated this year, in this year.
So right now we got 8 million plus, and the only thing earmarked to that is technology and buses.
And then the conversation about we had requested the door, upgrades, and then, that was an amount of, 600,000 or so. And then the rest of it was the discussion around the upgrades of the stadium. And transferring the money that was
From the
was
HVAC.
targeted for HVAC to address that with our ESSER dollars because it's air quality improvement. And then utilize those funds if we get approved. So that'd be the 4.5 million that would have been scheduled this year out of those funds.
So is that going to put that on hold?
It would, I don't believe so. I mean, it would certainly be a decision of the board and ultimately the commission, but,
That was one thing I mentioned to them, was we don't want to do anything that's going to take anything away from any other school or any other thing that's important.
That's what I was getting
I
at.
mean, that's not fair to everybody else.
based on the funds that we have as far as the schedule and this is property tax, revenue allocated for educational capital funds, the answer to that would be it should not.
Whenever you're ready. Whitney's got something next.
I just got one more
Mitch's-
question, I'll shut
On
up.
Mitch's email, it does have 2.6, that's an unaudited total, so it is subject to some change. The 2.6 plus.
So if I remember correctly, the emails we received, if we move forward with this, it's only going to increase it 300,000, or is that?
It's around up to 450,000 of this payment.
But what was it before that? What was it?
That's the two minus the 500,000 that is also obligated to Johnson City it's 2.125.
Okay.
Let me ask something, help me. What was the 1.5?
The one, now, that's something else for board's awareness that you previously committed to, cash money, if you want to put it that way, is the board is obligated to already 1.5 million outside of the project cost.
Which-
To address furnishing and so on.
So the 6.5 I quoted,
Yes, sir.
that 1.5 is part of that 6.5. So we've already agreed to 1.5. Really, they would be asking us for an additional 5. Correct? That's the way I understood
If
it.
there was some, I mean, if it was,
If it worked out
there was some
that way.
kind of,
5 million.
Thank you.
Yeah, we already said we're giving 1.5.
Right, for the furnishings and everything, which we had decided that when we sold Boone's Creek, we would
Yeah.
hold that money to be able to do that with. That was kind of what
right. with
this
the
table
sale
had
of the
talked
property.
about.
Now, with that, another thing, with what you just said, they also mentioned, I have to tell you what I got, I forget.
It's okay.
They also mentioned us selling some of our other Jonesboro property and that money going towards this potential 5 million, just like the furnishing money. Right?
But that was in the, that was in
It's
the
in the
original
agreement.
agreement that we were to sell Midway, and it was either the middle school or the elementary school, it was one or
Middle
the
school
other.
and the property in front of the elementary school.
And the property in front
But
of
the
them.
money went back into the school fund.
Right.
They're saying it still can, but it'll go towards, back into Jonesboro fund. Somehow,
It
some
could
way.
if the board chose to make
Yeah.
that decision, but.
Yeah.
So, just for explanation, bringing this back, I think we're getting away from it. So, we have 2.625 million earmarked to begin in financial year '24 to repay this debt. Is that just for 5 years, or is that until the debt is paid? 30 years.
It's a 30-year
So,
commitment.
what we're
yes, sir.
beating around here is irrelevant. This is paid for.
Wait a minute, you're losing. me.
This
The
is earmarked
2.1
money to pay for the school.
For 30 years.
Is that right?
Yeah, based on the 17 pennies that's been identified as going into the educational capital fund, with the assumption there will be growth, as there has been, at a very conservative rate over the 30-year period, that there would be always, I mean, there always will be money from that fund to pay the annual payment,
So,
you know, identified as a lease payment, but it's
just
really.
so we
paid in
all
lump.
understand, this is paid for. It's enough money to make the payment even with the extra money. So the rest of it, this point, it's mute. I mean, if we want to contribute more, we can.
But where
We
does
don't
the
have
money
to.
come from, though, is what I'm saying. We
It's
have to
the
add years
educational
to it.
capital fund, money that's set aside to pay this debt.
So you're saying we don't need to do anything, let them deal
We
with
need to
it?
build a school.
And we've already given them enough money to do it?
We need to build a school, which is what
Well-
we need to do. If we waited 2 more years, it'd be 10 to 15,000 or a million higher.
I know, but I'm losing you a minute.
It's paid for.
It's,
But it's higher, they're asking us to share in the extra 10 million
But
cost.
you're
That's
saying
right.
the 2.1 covers the debt even at
If
42
you do a
million,
30-year amortization on this.
at 2.5% interest.
2.25, it's 1.926520 a year. Or, an annual payment.
On 42 million?
42 million, 1.926 million. And we've got 2.1 to make a 1.96 payment.
I got you. You should have been a banker.
We should have.
Well, that's what I was saying.
Now, Kitty,
Well, no, I'm serious. You would want to take this, I wanted to take this $5.5 million that's supposed to be in this capital project and put it toward that, that 10 million. And then let the county come up with the other.
but now what he's saying is you don't need to put 5 million with it because you've already given it to them. That's why I kept asking that
Well,
question, I wasn't registered. But he's saying we've already given them more than enough to make the payment on 42 million. We don't need to give them 5 more million.
But the way I understand it, they're gonna cut them 17 pennies will be cut anyway, but how much more are they gonna cut them? If there's money already in the pot, then give it to them. Say, all right, here's 8 million. Take that 8 million and you go with it. leave these 17 pennies alone until debt service has to be called and we start making that, whatever the payment's gonna be every year. And that will be deducted from them 17 pennies.
So,
You,
here's my thing. This meeting here, was it not just to reinforce the support for the school?
we need to know your heart financially.
Because financially, it's not us. Financially, it's the
No.
county commission, whether they want to spend $42 million on this school, not whether we do or not. We need a new school. We want a new school for our kids.
No. Yes and no. Yes and no. They want $6.5 million from you, from somewhere.
But
Correct?
they do, but I believe within the amount that's available to us, as long as, to Mr. Urban's point, that the amount of pennies that have been allocated to this fund does not change.
That's right, until the project is done, and then they take,
But what
like
I-
on Boone's Creek, when you built Boone's Creek, you said it took 5 pennies to go to debt service. And that took care of the debt. But, all right, then it's gonna take how many pennies to take care of the debt on the 42 million?
Well, it sounds like,
About 300, something like that.
Well, it'd be less than,
46.
it'd be less than 42 million, because if we've already got $10 million to put toward it, then we won't be financing but 30 million.
Chad,
I wish Mr. Riddle was sitting over here next to me, no offense for you.
Well, you got the county finance director.
You're talking about the
He don't have that
the
high on
2.1 million.
So that's after you take away the 550 or 550,000 that we're required to pay Johnson City.
Yeah.
So if you take that out of the equation, that's, the total's 2.625 million. If you take that 500,000 plus out of that, then you've got 2.1 million left.
But you're saying it's all, this was what was already earmarked.
Yeah, beginning in fiscal year 2024, there was an amount
So we
that was
had a-
identified for the lease payment, which is essentially, paying the
Well,
loan.
the reason, that number in there was based on a shorter term loan and a higher interest rate. Okay?
So we're getting a lower interest rate and we're
In
going
the longer
longer.
term. That's exactly.
But we're still being able to cover the 42 million was asked and not,
And for the county, there also, under that type of a loan, there's also no penalty for early payoff. So there can be decisions made at any point to pay additional amounts, just like, an individual might consider doing to reduce the time of the payoff.
I just got concerned, and what my concern was, is not following exactly what Whitney was saying, I'm with us now, but I was concerned about our technology and our school buses being put on hold for a certain period of time, and knowing that need still comes up, and as a matter of fact, I think in 2 years, we have double the amount of buses that we did this year to be purchased, so
still gotta have
Thank you.
$6.5 million.
It's a different bucket, really, for that,
On top of all
I think. So really, to really boil it down to the basics, you've got 2.1 million remaining, and if you do.
we shouldn't do anything extra.
Right, well, this is just money that, it's 1.96 is the payment, basically, and you've got 2.1 to cover it. So it's doable. I mean, with the figures, and they may have bumped it up a little bit, like you said, to cover a higher interest rate, but a lower mortgage rate, but now we've got a lot lower rate, but we've got a higher balance there, but it still worked out in our
I
favor.
know what you're
But
saying.
you say there's money there to cover it, and
So-
Jason says they want 6 million of our fund balance.
That's irrelevant.
You're saying the numbers work.
The numbers work.
Maybe they just didn't understand the numbers.
Because, I mean, I would rather use the capital projects money than our fund balance, because we can always go into our fund balance for emergency.
Well, I think that's what they want, is that, I mean, that's where they wanted the money
He
from.
said that it's totally irrelevant, that we don't even need it.
I think it's,
According to the figures,
We just
and what
didn't tell
was
them that.
projected for this, for a
So they don't
30-year
want us to
payout
You-
on that.
I
we're-
think
send
that
that
the-
to somebody,
But we're from.
We still have to.
Not from the fund balance, from the school capital project
Right.
money. They want $6.5 million. Now, I understand what Whitney's saying, and I don't disagree at all. Maybe they didn't look that far into it. Maybe he needs to tell them. But I don't disagree with you at all.
haven't met.
No, they have
Yeah,
not.
Yeah.
discussion.
Yeah, there's
I think what,
decisions that have to be made.
I think, yeah,
I think in essence, we just need, we're all wanting to build a new school.
Yeah.
And we have the ability as a county to pay for it. And I don't think waiting is a good option. I think we need to all agree to move forward.
And I
that's
think
what
there's
we
a
do.
difference between wants and need, and this is not just a want, this is a need.
well, I think what you gotta do is just leave here tonight with an open mind of when they come back, you have all the information, you got good information there, we know what they asked for in the meeting, be prepared to make a decision once they meet, the days.
Where did 60/40 come from?
He explained it and I don't remember. I apologize.
I just think it was based on the discussion around $10 million extra, and that there was a belief that the county could come up with $4 million.
And we had money.
That was a meeting with Bob and
You
the
know that?
general staff.
And that's just my understanding of the conversation.
I'll be the other way around.
Yeah, I don't know, that's pretty much what they said, but I mean,
Bargain
that's,
that, right?
at this point, I think that's really, would you not agree, that's pretty much the gist of why we're here,
Just to be fully aware of the
You're informed
additional
and-
costs
yeah.
and the likelihood, mainly, so even with Mr. Riddle's, observation and calculation, the board would just have to understand that would commit that money for 30 years. I mean, as it was, seemed to be, originally it was planned maybe in shorter term, but higher cost on the interest, but it's just really that commitment, that long-term commitment.
and honestly, maybe nobody looked at it the way Whitney looked at it prior to the meeting, so,
at this time, we don't need any type of emotion or anything, we're just
we don't
gonna
need
do.
nothing. We
Okay.
just need you to be here, listen, and we could all talk about it, and
I don't completely understand it, but if it's gonna work, let's go.
Well, Mr. Chairman, well, he's got his hand up. Won't you?
No, I just wanted to ask Mr. Gordon if we could have facilities study, I believe we was going to see it November the 7th.
For the firm that the board would interview and choose.
Okay, so we won't even have, okay,
The actual, it'll take, realistically, it'll take, at least, I would say 6 months to finalize the facility study, 4 to 6 months.
can we get Mr. Patrick or the maintenance staff, Mr. Dr. Adams, whoever, to realistically give us the age of the roofs on our schools and our age of HVAC systems, and so we aren't shocked that, we got a 30-year-old system, and next year it turns 31-year-old. I mean, let's just, that way we get that out there, and we'll, to be comfortable with that.
And I guess that's really part of the purpose of your,
But this will shorten, could we do this a little bit?
you're just saying outside of our.
But it's just having those estimates outside of the study, I know that Mr. Patrick has that.
I mean, just so we're aware, not that we know that it's going to wreck tomorrow, but we do know how old it is today, and that way, something happens, it's not a shock.
Yeah, but we still need to move forward with the Jonesboro School, you're saying.
Yeah, I just want
We
to
don't
see
wait.
this before, but I do wish before Mitch gets, or Mr. Meredith gets a chance to say his speech, but I really wish Jonesboro would take advantage of the 3 people that's on this board that's supposed to be with them. So they're as aware as we, to be a liaison like they were supposed to.
It's pretty hard for them to do that, Chad, when they don't know when they're gonna have a meeting or anything. And I've sat here and heard them say that we didn't know they was having a meeting. Okay?
Well, I'm saying we need to step our game, they need to step our game up, that's what I'm saying.
does that conclude your speech?
You want to table it?
Mitch?
Well, I think all I was gonna say is,
is there a message that we do need, are there any messages we do need to send to the budget committee and the county commission? And I do think that we should leave here tonight sending some message, whatever it may be. We either move forward with the Jonesboro School at a total price tag of $42+ million, and we're good with using money in our capital investment plan to fund, to pay those lease payments. We're, whatever it'll take. If we need to take money out of our general purpose school fund, or we, good with moving forward in some shape or fashion, whatever that may be once the numbers are finalized.
If we need to tell them we're gonna move forward, whatever we need to do, because we've gone this far and there's a need there. We don't have a choice.
He just said 42 plus, and you said not to exceed.
He said not to exceed.
Well, the reset estimate was, as I think I read earlier, 42,777,115. But that's all estimation. The actual guaranteed maximum price will be hopefully received next week.
And will that come to us next week?
Certainly will go to the funding body and to Jonesboro City and to the board as all three partners.
Three things. Another thing we talked about was if this works out this way, that we make sure that Jonesboro has their playgrounds and everything intact. If we're going to do all this, because that wasn't part of the plan again. Also, we brought up Boone's Creek. I think the mayor had a plan on making that happen, maybe through some funding coming. And then I think to Mitch's point, somehow, first of all, everybody ought to try to be at that budget meeting that can be, which is tomorrow at 10 a.m. I think it'd be nice to have a good board presence. Second of all, maybe we need to relay them numbers like Mr. Riddle presented to somebody to make sure they're seeing that. Do you think that's a good idea? Let Mr. Boyd they won't know what we talked about in the message. I mean, I think that's a pretty clear message that
Well, I think we should
we're
send
good
the
to earmark
message
that money.
that we're willing to build a school. I think everybody here wants to build a school, and we need to build a school. And I think we should relay the message that we would be willing to work with them in some capacity. I think for all this to function and work as it should, we need to work as one. The school board, the county commission, we're all together in this game, and we all need to function together, and I think we need to agree to work with them. Whatever amount that is or how it works out, it's all for the greater good of the community and the children. So I think that's the message we need to send, that we'd like to move forward, and we're willing.
Doesn't it?
Well, look at it. You don't just look at it, he talks to it. Well, let me say this too, another thing, which is probably in his update, but just make sure we all know. Another reason this was sort of a rush to be here, to get that message through, because I think they're wanting to start grading potentially in October. So if this thing, we need to be ready to make a decision, whatever it may be, because they're wanting to move.
They did mention that on their design committee, that agreed that if we don't get started this fall, it's going to possibly put us back a whole year.
Yeah,
As far as
so
getting-
keep that in mind.
So when you mentioned the playgrounds for this area over here, you were meaning that we would move what we have here to there?
We didn't talk about moving, we talked about making sure they had them in this number, that they put new playgrounds in Jonesboro.
There's only one playground in there, in that
Design.
design, and it is the CDC playground. That is the only one that's in there, because there was grant funds for that.
Well, we just need to, don't forget about it.
I'm just-
If we gotta come up with that kind of money, let's make sure we got a playground. Matter of fact, I'd hope nobody building their school without putting in playground.
Amen.
We'll spend 30 million, 300,000, put a blessed playground in. So Chad's about to go crazy over here, ain't you?
I'll quit talking.
All right, anybody got anything else? I think we've covered it.
Well,
I'd take a straw vote if it were me.
I'm
I'd make it a motion.
thinking that, Mitch, how many pennies it take to take care of the 42 million?
Oh, I haven't done the math on that. Well, Mr. Boyd's got it right there. It's gonna be, you know, something less than $2.6 million over 30 years.
So that would be the payment going to Jonesboro.
I think that, and Johnson, in the city of Johnson City.
Mr. Chairman.
Before we make them, let's wait a minute for you, just let's talk about that just a minute. Let's talk about that. Let's think about that before we do it.
Pull
I gotta catch a plane in the morning.
So,
Yeah, that would be committing.
Well, I don't think- I don't know what you can make a motion on, but if you're gonna make a motion, I would recommend you make a motion based on, you'll give what that says we're gonna give for the next 40 years, whatever it is, that it would be,
I
that the
think,
calculations cover that amount of money, and that, does that make sense? Or am I thinking wrong?
they've already raised the taxes. It's, what he says, it's gonna take 8 pennies to fund it, the 42 million, and us not giving nothing. So, the 8 pennies, we'll let them take the 8 pennies from that 17, and that still leaves us 9 pennies that's a building to keep projects going that we need to work on, roofs and stadiums and stuff like that.
Do we need to go that deep?
Well,
With the
they're
commission?
gonna do it one way or another because the money's coming, that's where they're gonna get their money to make the payment to Jonesboro is out of them 17 pennies, right?
Yeah, that's where it's been laid out for the last
Yeah.
couple of years since we started that.
But we're not the only ones that build out of that pot, replace out of that pot of it.
No,
We
it's,
are, no, this is.
we are.
It's separate, okay.
Yeah.
This is all,
So
okay.
either make a motion that we let them take the 17, take 8 pennies away from that and build the school, or we can give them $5 million that's in this capital projects fund and lower that 42 down to 37 and be less pennies.
I think we're getting too deep into it.
Well, it's, I mean, Whitney, it's they're gonna do. They're gonna take these pennies for our capital projects. That's how they're gonna pay for this school.
Well,
Which was the original.
Yeah.
intent. There's no doubt
You
about
get
it.
the money.
So if I just may, point out something, the concern I'd have with making a statement like the pennies is the value of the pennies is going to grow, but the loan payment's going to stay the same over time. So I would focus mostly on addressing the loan payment out of the educational capital fund.
Correct.
Well, I think I like, because that more what Whitney's talking about, give them because another thing about that, Keith, if you get, I lost you a little bit, but the other thing about what he's saying is, if we've already allocated enough money to cover the debt in whole at 42 million potentially, what we need to do? Am I lost again?
Well, what I'm saying is, they're getting it here. That's where they're getting it at. They ain't
But
getting
he's
it from
right,
nowhere
those
else.
could grow though.
Them pennies, that's what they're gonna get.
But they might not need 8 pennies in 5 years, they might just need 7.
Right.
Is that what you're saying?
They're asking,
So we're gonna give them 8,
I know, but they're asking for $10 million, right?
6.5.
Well, 6
But
and
they're-
9,
they're
all right, that's why I say, we'll give 5, we'll take 5 out.
Because we already give them
And-
1.5.
Yeah, and we'll, that'd be, that number, the penny number right there will change.
So let's say this right here then, Mr. Riddle, if we agreed to give them $5 million more dollars, does that accomplish what you're trying to say, what you're trying to say, Keith?
No.
No.
Well, I'm trying to
We
get,
don't even need to discuss that at this point.
All we need to say is, because what you're saying is they're gonna take that 2.1 no matter what, and they don't even need 2.1.
There's 2.625 million per year to cover this debt.
And it takes
And it'll
out,
more than cover it.
that's the 42 million, not,
42 million
But
and
what-
the 500,000 for Johnson City.
but what I'm saying, Whitney, is they're gonna take it from this 17 pennies.
well, that's kind of
You
irrelevant.
see what I'm
isn't it?
saying?
Is that irrelevant?
That's, I mean, what you're saying is, I understand what you're saying, but the payment's gonna come from this.
Right.
And that's fine, but what I'm
And we
asking
can
is-
give them 5 million out of capital projects and have more pennies left here when the project's
Okay,
done, right?
then
Well,
where did we
no,
come up
because-
with 2.1? Or where did we come up with that number?
If you have 2.625 million,
Yeah.
and you take out of it payment for 500,000 to Johnson City that was agreed upon for this project,
Yeah.
okay? That leaves you with 2.1 million to pay the rest of the debt, which in this, could be some loan costs and things, but my estimate is 1.926 million, of which you have 2.1 to cover. So it covers.
Okay, let me ask you a question right there. Where did we get that number? Where did we originate that
It's what was
number?
scheduled to begin in fiscal year '24 to pay the Jonesboro
So why?
loan payment.
Okay, so, I guess, and this is where I'm going, why do we have, if it would've only been 32 million, you wouldn't have needed but 2 million to give Johnson City 500 and us 1.5 to cover 32 million, so why is it 2.6?
Well, again, it's because the interest rate was higher and the term was shorter.
Okay.
They went from what, 20, 25 years to 30?
Yeah.
The 38.
Somewhere, so that's why it's less, that's why what's in there now will cover that additional cost.
Well, I'm huge, just do it.
And Keith, you leave the pennies there because Mr. Boyd's exactly right. Those pennies are going to grow, but your payment is fixed. So you wouldn't want to give up,
You'd be
you
giving
know,
more than
7
you need
pennies
to.
today because it, yeah, I mean,
I understand
and
that.
so you just
I
keep
understand
paying
that.
it
Might
out
be
of
worth
that
9
fund.
pennies 2 years from now.
Right.
Okay,
I think,
I'm clear. Is everybody else clear?
Is he gonna make a
Please.
motion?
I don't even know.
What do you want to do?
I make a
Like he
motion.
said, we need, I'm sorry, yes,
Go
we
ahead.
do need something to give them maybe when they meet tomorrow at the budget meeting.
Let's hear the motion.
All right.
I'd like to make a motion that we, as a school board, recommend that we move forward with the Jonesboro School project as planned, and that we utilize the earmarked money for educational capital fund to pay back the debt. And I think that we should support that.
And I second.
Got that, Jennifer?
Should we add the word project in there? Capital project?
Educational capital project fund.
I would like to use the word, if you're saying capital projects money to pay for it, I would like to use pennies in the capital project money. Because that word, what you just said, they could take it out. Am
No,
I
he said
looking at
earmark.
it?
This is
Earmark,
Keep the
earmark.
limitation on it, no more than 2.6 million or no more than 2.5.
Okay, well, you see what I'm saying? I mean,
Yeah.
But that's not even our game.
This will be a fixed
well,
loan. There'd be no penalty for early payoff, I would say.
Did you
So if
say-
we wanted to, at some point, pay additional to the principal and reduce the amount or the term, you can do that. If the county does, they can do so. So we can work together to do that. And I think we should work together to do that for the taxpayers' benefit to help reduce the debt service. And I think over time we may, some years will be lean, some will be better. But if we work together, we can achieve that.
Did your motion state that it was for the payment, or did it just say take the money out of the capital project fund? I think that's what he's trying to get at, is the fact that they wouldn't take more than,
So if you put in an amount instead of pennies fluctuate.
right,
But if you put in an amount that they have earmarked, which is what I said, the 2.625 million,
Okay.
that makes your payments over a 30-year period.
okay.
Whether, how many pennies it takes to get to that, you've got a fixed amount, whether it's 8 or 9 or 10 pennies, doesn't matter. But you have a fixed amount there for your payment to cover the service.
So, okay.
All right.
is that how they do debt service? Penny grows and just like what you.
Flat and your revenue does this.
Yeah, but what I was, 5 pennies is going towards debt service on the Boones Creek. That's what was estimated it would cost to do that. All right, a penny then was worth
They've
$2.80.
grown some.
All right, is all that money out of them 5 pennies going to it, or is that just enough to make the payment and say it would take only a penny, or there'd be a penny left? Does that penny go back into county funds, or how, or does it keep going to the
It
debt?
stays in there just to pay off the debt. It stays in the debt service fund.
Okay,
Until something-
so that means that debt could be paid off earlier?
Correct.
Yes.
Correct.
All right, let's vote, Jennifer.
Mr. Masters?
Yes.
Mr. Riddle?
Yes.
Mr. Irvin?
Aye.
Ms. Buchanan?
Yes.
Ms. Dellinger?
Yes.
Mr. Fleener?
Yes, ma'am.
Mr. Hammond?
Yes.
Mr. Meredith?
Yes.
Mr. Day?
Yes.
All agree.
All right, we got a plan. Good, meeting adjourned.
That debt service fund, build up the fund balance, and then we could, the debt service fund. We're gonna pay all I just can't.
I know, and that's what I'm saying. 5 pennies is
I knew we had. No, it was heartbreaking.
I've got to use some of my
Every time. Right, no. I think what the motion that. First, that was originally scheduled. That's too hard, right? Oh, I understand. It's gonna touch the fund balance.